And just quickly, let me just introduce Anthony, who, as I said earlier, is the Chief Research and Impact Officer at the RSA. I just want to acknowledge the fact that he is taking time out of his busy afternoon. He's not just the Chief Research and Impact Officer currently, he's also co-leading the RSA with our Chief Operating Officer as we await the arrival of our new CEO in September. So Anthony, seriously, thank you for taking the time, and I will hand it over to you.
Thanks, Diggs, and good to see you all. And it's really absolutely zero burden for me to step away to spend some time with this group of amazing thinkers and amazing network. And I just want to start off by thanking the Augmented Society Network for what you've done in producing this incredible document, an opportunity to reimagine learning, which clearly has been thought, engagement, conversations, learning together, and values. And it exemplifies what the RSA is about. We exist to bring ideas and people together, to lean into the macro challenges that we as societies are facing, often together. Our vision is to support a world in which everyone can participate to resolve the challenges of our time. So to see a group of fellows, a group of our sort of 30,000 strong global fellows, take forward these values, this ethos, this sense of vision, with some who are not in the fellowship as well, I think is incredibly powerful. And the report that's been put together, I think, will get you all thinking. So I want to thank the network and thank everyone else for joining the conversation today. I can see, by the way, my internet connection isn't stable, so I'll carry on, and apologies for that. But there was so much in this report that resonated with me, with the RSA's thinking in this area. We run 4 programs of focus. We focus on social impact. We're a social change organization. We blend together research ideas, policy, design, innovation, a global events platform, as well as the fellowship. We try to bring all these things together to focus in on what can make our societies better. There was so much in this report that resonated with our to figure out the skills and strategies required to thrive within a constantly changing world that provides no absolutes in relation to our future. So we've got to feel our way forward. We've got to have a vision of where we want to be, proceed with the values that we cherish and hold dear, but we've got to figure it out. And the conversation you're all going to have today, as well as the thinking that's in the report, helps us do that. But there were so many sort of notes that were struck that cross over with the things that we're interested in, from the sort of value of the arts, creativity, design thinking and complexity, the human-centered approach, system thinking, participation and engagement, inclusivity and universality, the need for deep lifelong learning, need for clarity of education vision, the engagement with social technologies. There's technology for its own sake, but technology with purpose that speaks to human values, sort of recognition of capabilities over raw attainment, without throwing the baby out of the bathwater. People have to acquire knowledge and develop, and they're tested in that often in our education systems. But we need a broader recognition of wider capabilities, of wider contribution to community. Sort of badging and trust, everyone being an educator. We experiment with this in some of our programs of work, which I'll come on to in a bit, and then a sort of ethics and values rich education. The crossover with our focus on future of work, fair education, what we call a learning society, and the desire to see a regenerative future, one in which humanity and ecology can thrive together. so many of these themes are woven through what we're interested in, and we're a small staff in the UK and the US and Australia and New Zealand. So to have the intellectual power and creative force of a group of fellows and a wider network to help us think through and improve and develop as we try to make a positive impact is incredibly useful. So I recommend reading the report in depth. I have, and I've taken it back to our teams and asked them to engage with it deeply. Sort of close off with just a few reflections as to where we are as societies and what we're grappling with. I don't know about all of you, but I sense the last 18 months have shown two contrasting capabilities in our society. It's shown an enormous resilience and an enormous fragility as well. And those two things have gone together. Often the resilience has come from us as societies, as communities. We've rediscovered solidarities. We've been able to change our behaviors often, not universally, but often. And we've confronted a global challenge in a way that I think maybe surprised a lot of people. We've probably surprised ourselves. We've probably surprised a lot of the people that lead us as to how we've been able to lean in collectively to a challenge that we faced. But at the same time, I think deep fragilities have been revealed in our economic system, in our social structures and the inequalities therein, discrimination therein, in our governance structures, in our democracies. The things that we thought that were systems that were there to protect us and were predictable and were for us often have let us down. And so the question for us is, where do we go from here? You know, we've got to learn from what we've been through and what it shows to move forward. So do we move forward on the basis of what I think is quite a hopeful message, in line with that resilience that we've shown? But I think it opens up possibilities. We can push ourselves further as we seek to learn as societies, and we seek to be learning societies, how we craft and design and think about what the future of work looks like and how we lead into climate emergency. Do we build on that sort of foundation, or are we subsumed by the fragilities that are shown? So do we use the resilience in order to try to rectify some of the fragility, or will we be consumed by some of the fragilities that have been to fix that? And the conversation you're having today will be a big part of that. The conversation in this report is a big part of it. Do look at our wider work, you know, the events, the podcasts, the reports, our research, our programs of impact, trying to change places and ways of acting around learning systems, as well as thinking about what sort of future scenarios there may be around the future work. Have a look at all that, and hopefully there's fuel for thought. Hopefully it's useful to you in your professional lives and beyond, in your communities. And let's keep the conversation going. And thank you so much for all that you're doing.
Thanks, Anthony. It's great to hear everything that's going on with the RSA as a whole. With the Augmented Society Network, what we are is a thematic network within the greater whole of the RSA. And we have been around for a few years, and in the least, it's about networking with other like-minded members of society to talk about how society is going to be augmented, whether it's through high technologies like artificial intelligence, cryptocurrency, blockchain, genetic research, or systems. just how are systems changing as society evolves. And so it really provides an opportunity for people all over the world to come together. Our usual bare minimum is a session a month where we talk about a different subject. And again, it's all members of society. Some people were like, well, I'm not a technologist, should I be there? And our response is, are you a member of society? Well, of course, you should be there. So we do those sessions. Another part of what we look to do is create a sandbox for people to work together on developing new pieces of whether it's a product, whether it's something that affects policy that causes people to think differently. And leading to that third part of our remit, which is to hopefully create or influence policy or to help others to learn what is possible. Which brings us to this project here. We stopped our regular programming and shifted it because of the pandemic. Sort of a stop and let's all chat and work through this in the midst of the pandemic, not knowing how long it's going to go.
Wait,
and
wait,
from
there was a pandemic?
Yes,
Did
Mitch,
I miss
yes,
it?
I know it. Yes, I know you are in your bubble and sometimes miss those things, but yes, we all were in a pandemic. We were all closed off, but we were made available to each other through technologies like Zoom. And so the conversation never stopped, and the opportunity to create, in some cases, was strengthened. And we looked at education as being one of the big challenges that the pandemic really shined a light on the cracks. Even before the pandemic, if you were to look at education, whether it was in traditional schooling, hell, in Detroit, Michigan, their fourth grade standardized testing, only 6% and 7% were grading it grade level for the maths and language. So that wasn't just like, oh, the pandemic came along, everybody is affected. There were issues to begin with. When we look at professionals and the fact that we talk about the Industrial Revolution, within that, yes, we're in our fourth Industrial Revolution, but industrial evolution happens all the time. And we find that there are businesses that once were thriving, in the case of 3 years later, they're defunct. And so when we set off, there was an interest to do something, to explore education, to explore learning. And we decided to really take that as one of our pieces to build off of. And so we didn't know what we were doing in terms of what the outcome was going to be. The original intent that we had was, well, let's do something like a white paper. And the cool thing about this is because we have people from all over the world that are part of ASN, Augmented Society Network, what if we were to have them come in? And it's not about for a white paper, usually you see it's based on what's happening within the walls of that company to espouse what they can do. Let's look at it as, hell, if this is about society, what can we all do together where it's not dictated by what our business or political or community practices are. It's just influenced by and strengthened because of the diversity of those things. We immediately started looking at who can we have participate, and it certainly was a lot of the members already active within Augmented Society Network. And it was also a matter of us going out and finding others. And I'm really excited to see that I reached out to a dear friend in Pakistan who has incredibly brilliant daughters in school. And I asked them if they could participate. And I see that one of them, participating in this. So we even have diversity in this discussion. And as I was saying, we didn't know where we were going. We were thinking in terms of white paper. We changed it to blueprint, but it became very clear that there's no way we are going to be able to capture what the possibilities are as we reimagine what learning is about in even a year. Figure we've worked on this for a year. So the goal was ultimately, let's make this open source. How can we turn this into an open source project so that people can come in just like open source development, people can come in from anywhere in the world at any time and input and evolve and bring brightness to others to grow what that original product is. And so we look at this publication as the end of the beginning. And so as we go through this session today, and we all thank you so much for being here. It's awesome to see the response. And I know that there are people that couldn't make it at this time, but we will have the recording, and people can always reach out. If you wanted to find out anything about Augmented Society Network, you just check out augmentedsociety.org. All of our sessions, our monthly sessions, are published as a podcast. So even those you can listen to. If you want to reach out to us, info@augmentedsociety.org is a way to reach us via email. Also, you can reach through to the RSA, whether it's Anthony's team or Diggs, who's here in the US. Ultimately, what we're hoping for from this program here is to present the challenges and considerations that were made in the creation of what you're seeing via the 8 themes that we settled on for this beginning phase, and then to move on to the future. And so when you see the different sessions or the different breakout groups, you get to choose which of the 3 you want to go to. And the first breakout will be an inflection of what are those considerations, what are those challenges, and then we'll come back and summarize, and hopefully somebody that wasn't part of the original crew will be able to present to everybody what was discussed. Then we'll go into another breakout session where we'll talk about the future. So if you choose, you can do the same breakout room twice, or you can get a different sense of just coming at it from different ways. Our hope at the end of this is that you all will raise your hand and say, I want to participate. I want to take this forward, because we're really proud of this is. I think, I can only speak for myself, but in conversation with others, the most amazing part of this experience was the working with people in different ways. And we had theme leads, we had theme editors, we had some editors at large. We had somebody like Julie Samuels, who was amazing in working with Zoe, Mitch, and I to figure out everything and refine it, because there were a lot of words. There was a lot of content. There was a lot of time and practice that went into the creation of this. And it was such an awesome experience to be working with such a diverse group of people from all over the world. We had 5 continents covered. We had lawyers, we had venture capitalists, futurists, sociologists, certainly educators at all levels of education. And it was really all about creating that future of learning, because we recognize that the ways that society has created for learning might not ring true anymore. In fact, most cases it doesn't. When kids look at how to learn how to do math or what have you, when they could just ask Siri or Google for the answer and get it immediately, working through times tables doesn't always make sense. And as we are looking at what are the roles that we have in terms of helping others succeed and excel at any level, whether we're teachers in the traditional sense or mentors in the professional sense, it's all about constant learning. So I'm going to stop. Diggs, if you can please put up that slide that has the different themes. And if you've read the piece, you'll see that the themes here are not presented in the same order as they are in the project. What we did here was we put the breakouts into groupings so that regardless of which one you go to, you get the whole picture, right? So I'll be leading room 1, which is about the basics. You can see the description here, right? But it's a matter of, and I'll get more into it, but you can see what these different themes are. And I'm going to hand off now, as you're watching that, to Mitch Weisberg, who was also one of the editorial directors of this project.
Hi, so I'm going to be leading room 2. And in 2, we're going to be talking about the education purpose and context of success, about success, failure, and evaluation, and about access, inclusive difference, and universality. As you're thinking about the different rooms, some of the things that we're going to be talking about are, how has the purpose of education changed over the last 100 years? How has the pandemic shed light on this topic? How should our thinking of education change based on the changes in technology, the economy, the environment, and society? And how have our roles changed in the quest for learning beyond education? And then we'll be talking about how the pandemic has magnified the issues of inclusion and access, whereas they were always there. How have they changed? How have we paid lip service to inclusion? And what does it mean for education to be a main driver of real inclusion and equity and access? And then we'll be talking about, and I saw there's an individual from Scotland who's involved in success, failure, and evaluation, but we'll be talking about how has our obsession over measurement, success, and failure cost us, and how do we move beyond it? So those are the topics we're going to be covering in the first breakout room. Well, in room 2, we'll be covering what the report says and what your thoughts are. And then after we come back together again and go to the breakouts again, in room 2, we're going to be talking about, so given these issues, what should we be doing now?
And then I will be in room 3. My name's Zoe Camper. And room 3 will be looking at 2 themes, and they are solving complex problems where there is no solution. So we will look through design thinking, designing for exclusion and inclusion, and turning the way we might think about learning on its head from where it is currently. As a process of receiving information, what we're looking for here is to establish empathy and understanding and the idea about what it is to be human and to design. Alongside that, we have joined that with the lifelong learning and societal fabric theme, which seemed to be the most pertinent to this. And this will look into just what it means to be human and how to get the very best from your life. Carlos is here with us today, and I remember him talking about the things that people say on their deathbeds, for example, and one was never, I wish I'd been in the office more. Well, one was also, I wish I'd been my true self. I wish I'd followed the passion or the desire that I felt I was born with or raised huge passions with, but my life disappeared in front of me. So we're looking at ways in which society can be more part of everyone's life and where the responsibility for that lies. So that's lifelong learning combined with solving complex problems, and that will be in breakout room 3.
So I know that rooms 1 and 2 made executive decisions for 2 extra minutes. So you'll get 2 extra minutes to think about what you're going to report out. And I will start with Zoe's room, since Carlos was starting to share about the Brené Brown piece that he put in the link. How was room 3? Give us the cliff notes of your discussion.
Sure. So I'll kick off, but I'm going to rely on Linda and Carlos if I should not capture everything properly. Our topic was complex problems for where there is no solution. That typically reflects in learning as design thinking and the use of empathy and human-centered design to learn, as opposed to the to and fro of current education structures. Linda is deeply involved in that, and Carlos is deeply involved in the lifelong learning and what it is to be authentic. He put the Brené Brown link into the chat, which I think would be the first thing I'm going to do when I finish this session. I think the highlights from our session really is, and I think one of the most interesting is how young people and children have actually tested education to its limits during the pandemic. They were immediately placed in the position of having to accept a very new way of learning, which they were able to really think through, criticize, learn from, see all the flaws in the rawness of what was quite often an inept delivery system. I know when Amy and I talk here in Las Vegas, the availability of Wi-Fi, for example, is non-existent in North Las Vegas. So children were put in a position where they were being denied, or they were being helped, or they were being denied and helped at the same time. So is this a question that the children should lead themselves? Is this something that we should be listening to them directly about? We also looked at, I can't think who it was it Keith? I can't remember, about the need for the way children can lead and be asked to identify what it is that's important to them. If we could ask children to say what it was that they actually wanted, we would find a much more truthful and energetic response to their learning. So children came out as being the ones that we should be looking to and asking about what the future should be for us. Now, that's a difficult one for us who live in the world of thinking that we know best and not thinking we know best, but being in that role as teachers, educators. And so there is a huge reversal of roles that we need to look into. And we also discussed the fact that in the paper, there are quotes from, 1,000 years ago up to 50 years ago and backwards and forwards. We found quotes that point to the fact that the educational learning systems are suffering and have not been changed. The current system that we are working in was effectively designed 100 years ago to support parents that could go and work. So a huge amount to do, a twist on the focus as to who we should be asking to lead us out of this. So I think that's it. Carlos, Linda, anything you would like to add?
No, well, I think it will be great to hear the other two groups and then continue with the discussion. So
that's us, Diggs.
Sounds good. Thank you. Let's go to Mitch, since you're closest to me in Brady Bunch mode. How was room 2?
Well, the participants in group 2 were great. The leader sucked. We actually touched on all 8 topics in the beginning, just to go through what the 8 different focuses are, and then there's this huge debate about what is the real purpose of education, and we also were able to at least touch on inclusion, and hopefully we'll talk more on inclusion. But some of the points that came out in terms of what the purpose of education is and how inclusive can we make it, is discussing, should education be primarily about self-actualization for the individual? Should education be primarily about provision of needed skills, like learning how to use technology or foundational skills or learning how to learn? Should education be primarily helping us fit in with societal norms? Should it be, or to what extent does it, maybe unfortunately, reinforce existing class structures and serve as a function of filtering and preparing people for their roles as, say, elite or privileged or high-end workers or lower class workers? To what extent should education equalize this class structure, which is the exact opposite of that? So that seems possibly more aspirational. And so to what extent can education help society include everybody? To what extent is the real purpose of education learning academic skills like language skills, math, science, history, and especially given the fact that this is what we test. So by testing, do we overemphasize some of this? To what extent is education really childcare so that parents can meet the other priorities such as work? How can we use education to promote a sustainable future. That the purpose, when we think of education as learning now, no longer do we think of it as just something that's for kids, but we understand that we're all learning throughout our entire lives. And then as we were started talking about inclusion, we started, understanding that if we're going to be making decisions, they're going to affect different groups of people or affect all of us as a group. We need to include all different parts of society in those discussions and in the decision making. And if we can do that, then we can have education be a force of growth for everyone. And we can also have education as something that promotes experimentation, iterations, and learning from failure. So I think, Amy, would you like to add to that? Because you were in the process of making a really important point also when we moved over. So yeah, Amy or Julie?
So we sort of ran out of time, and certain people spoke more than others in our room. So we didn't really get to hear like a well-rounded version of everyone's thoughts. And after the session, after we came back to this main room just now, some of the participants private messaged me and said, "Oh, shame, I would love to hear more about your thoughts." And others of the participants messaged me and said, "Hey, you were out of line." So just the idea of me trying to, in the breakout room just now, create space for other people's voices, and how that was perceived very differently by two participants in this very session, is pretty much the point of our section of the paper. Whose voices are not heard, listened to, valued, included in education today? And what can we do to sort of create space or open space for those voices to be included? And it's a struggle that we have to start with ourselves, myself included. It's so challenging. And I think that's something that we experienced literally in this session just now in our breakout room. So I applaud everyone who spoke. I applaud everyone who did not speak. I applaud everyone who private messaged me their thoughts, and hats off to you, Julie and Mitch, for wrangling a very unruly participant such as myself.
Our pleasure, Amy.
Any other thoughts? Julie, did you have other, since Mitch mentioned you?
No, I was just thinking about, when we did the paper, the issues that we explored about kinship, belonging, discrimination, inequalities, and we talked a lot about how these factors actually impact and influence our understanding of the world, the way we interact with our friends, the way we raise our children. We discussed how, education is seen to be the fix for everything, but there are so many people that cannot access education. During the pandemic, we talked about there was education poverty. In the UK, there was food poverty, there was fuel poverty, technology poverty. The word poverty now is linked to so many aspects. So it's not about can I access education, it's can I feed my kids? Can I pay for the Wi-Fi? There were so many issues, and and as we talked and we discussed things, I realized we're all very, very privileged because we had roofs over our head, we had food, we had Wi-Fi, whether it's intermittent or not. We had access to all of these things. We were talking about all these people who don't have access, and the question is now, we need to change that narrative. How are we going to reach these people that do not have access to technology, do not have access to clean water, to food, because their priorities will not always be education. It's going to be survival.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm managing across two screens. So, but thank you, Julie. Are we good to move to room 1, Jonathan, just to make sure we stay on time?
Absolutely. And I would rather not talk. I feel like I've talked enough. So is there anybody that participated in room 1 that can talk about our knockout or knockdown drag out conversation? It wasn't really knockdown drag out. It was nice, but there were really good things that came up. Anyone? Don't make me do my Ferris Bueller alliteration again.
Jennifer has
Jennifer, did you want to talk?
Go ahead,
Hi.
Jennifer.
Well, I kind of like, like regular trade shows, right? When you go, there's more breakout sessions that I want to attend. So I kind of went half to room 3 and half to room 1. But in the second part, I feel like we kind of ended on, talking about sustainability and how to bring the education of sustainability to everyone. And I have a quick example of, I like to tell people to lead at the most, within your own power, leading by example. And I have a friend of mine who, works in the travel industry, and she had made it a booking platform for people to be able to book like sustainable vacations and stuff. But then she changed and said, you know what? People aren't going to want to do this if they don't understand what it is yet. So she's kind of pivoted and changed to a platform of talking to people about how to be sustainable in your travels and what that looks like for hotels and what that looks like for operators to bring that to their industry. And even I was telling them in there, I've been working across a lot of connected solutions within different industries. And that is an underlying factor in pretty much every industry. And I think if society gets kind of on board with that, in the sense of, how we've already gotten past, a lot of people are vegetarian now, or at least understand what that means, or a lot of people, know about single-use plastics. If we can get to like a baseline kind of fundamental strong point of sustainability practices within business, then that will also help speed up the education of the children coming up behind us, as well as the transformation of the education system to be able to promote those ideas and thoughts that are necessary to have.
Great, thank you. Guy?
Yeah, greetings. Very briefly, the question that arose for me is around the fundamental framing of this entire project when we imagine the future. If we frame it as a 4th industrial revolution, the brain goes to one place. I do my framing for the future around a new ecological civilization, which takes the brain to another place entirely. I just want to leave that thought with everyone.
Yeah, and interesting, look, we're always, whether we're educators or putting on events or just making references, like I made a reference to the Ferris Bueller's Day Off with the teacher trying to get a response from the students. We talk about I don't even know that I put 4th Industrial Revolution into the description of this event, but it's it's that challenge always of hooking into what is known and understood and relatable, and trying to, and when we talk about future, it's how do you break out of that and perhaps go to metaphor to be thinking of things entirely differently. So I agree with your point, Guy, that when we talk about the 4th Industrial Revolution, it's all iterative of the previous, when we really have to break free of that and think about what is really happening. And one of the pieces that I found really interesting that you brought up, Guy, was that whole element of climate change and how we don't deal with that, or it seems that we don't deal with that. And one of the pieces that was brought up about how does that shift, how, and are we letting, Tim brought up the concept of, are we letting down the current students by not bringing those things up? And with what Ben was dealing with in his theme in terms of the education or the empowering, or not even just the supporting of educators so that they can educate others. And being as we're all educators, and we educate and we learn at the same time, how do we instill that? How do we bring that in? That's the biggest challenge, because we're still working off textbooks that might not have changed for 60 or 70 years. And that's a really compelling challenge that we've got to figure out as we look at what do we really need as a society in order to grow and evolve. Does anybody else have any other points from that first breakout, session 1?
I know it's not from session 1, but I don't know if Richard was in session 1, but he brings up a very good point about why are we making this all so complicated? Are we following something that we don't need to follow? And is this actually extraordinarily simple? But it's our mindset that makes us think that this is hard. I think it's a bit hard, but that has to be questioned. The context in which you are asking these things is as valid as the thing that you are asking.
Right. Cyril, you were in the group and you took yourself off mute. Do you want to say something?
The only thing I would say to Guy, I fully agree on what he mentioned regarding the ecology and the climate change point. On the other hand, I also think that the fourth industrial revolution has a lot of disruption ready in order to take care of climate change and also to be supportive. So I don't think that fourth industrial revolution completely exclude the whole ecological aspect.
I think that when we talk about climate change, it includes the word change, which we as humans seem to have the biggest challenge with, which is change. And to what Zoe said about how are we able to break from what the norms are, it really comes down to our personal resolve. And those that are saying, I'm not happy with how things have gone, being able to make that change is it's in some ways really simple, but in some ways really challenging, because even once you've made the change, you're still conflicted by what others might think of you, or how others might regard, or what other issues you might run into. So those are certainly challenges that we have to think about. Guy, do you have one more thing before we move on?
Well, actually, Guy, you're on mute, but I'm going to take advantage of that for 2 seconds. We're going to start the next breakout rooms at 1:15. So if folks who don't have a point to make, we need a comfort break, I'd say take it now. We're going to start the next breakout rooms in 3 minutes. Guy, take it away.
Thanks. Yeah, we increasingly don't use the term climate change. We talk climate emergency or climate crisis. And if I'm mobilizing young people, say, let's move to the future, and the future is a fourth industrial revolution, there ain't no one joining me. If I say, let's move to a future into new ecological civilization, yes, they're joining me. They're excited. It speaks to their heart and something deeper. Fourth industrial revolution sounds like the third plus digital AI. It doesn't inspire at a deep level. That's the kind of thing I'm getting at.
Yeah, absolutely.
Jonathan, you said something at the end that's very important. Is social pressure is really high on a lot of people. So we need to work to empower younger generations to be authentic, to disengage from social pressure, which is really difficult, but we need to do that. It's an imperative. And I don't see that in my students. They don't even talk in class, for example, just because, oh, what if I say something stupid? So that's a very important point, Jonathan. I don't know, Linda, if you want to add something in this 1 minute left in design thinking.
Funny that you say that. You know, I'm very fortunate because I have adult, you know, in the doctor program. We aren't shy about expressing our opinions, but I have said in undergraduate courses where that's exactly what happens, and I'm just amazed. I'm just amazed at how students just sit there, and they have so much to offer. And they just sit there.
So I know we started with Zoe last time, so let's go in reverse order and start with Jonathan. How is the second version of the breakout rooms for you? And if there's a designated person to speak, please feel free to shout them out.
Who wants to? Is there somebody that would like to speak, please? So okay, so basically you've heard what was talked about in this group in the first session, and it was sort of a continuation and a positioning of deeper into how do we keep things open to be able to explore those unknowns, and to as things are evolving, and the belief that we're all both educators and learners at the same time, how do we help facilitate that? Something that I feel very strongly about that is going to have to be answered as we move forward is, as society, individuals within society, are we going to go with the conceit that we have to get bigger and better and stronger by pushing others down? Or do we succeed by helping everybody succeed? I hope it's the latter. That's the world in which I live, that I try to facilitate everybody lifting each other. And that also can help determine which way we move forward with our form of learning, because ultimately it is a question of how do we facilitate learning? Whose responsibility is it? Does there need to be, please, anybody that was in our group jump in, because I might be, obviously I've been so close to this project for so long, I might be putting things that weren't discussed in the room, and I want to honor what was discussed in the room, but what's the responsibility of the corporations to support the learning as opposed to relying on others to set up, to do that training? It's almost like a pro sport team utilizing the development that was done at the amateur level, where the pro team doesn't give anything to the amateur team. Or if we're talking about football, Premier League doesn't, like, unless they're paying a transfer fee to one of the lower leagues, they don't pay anything for the development of the players that move up, just as one example. So how can we make it so that corporations do take a larger role in supporting that growth? Any other thoughts from?
I would just jump in. There was a really interesting conversation where, all right, where does the systemic change begin? Does it come from the top down, or does it come from the bottom up? And there were two different opinions. But what was interesting is, as the conversation continued, the answer was sort of, actually, it's going to be coming from both places. That they has to happen from both, and this is the time for it to begin. This is the moment where we have an opportunity. We realize that this was a global event, opportunity for us to look inside ourselves, intrinsically and extrinsically, that the changes can begin.
Thank you.
Thank you. Room 2, Mitch's room. Any reflections?
So I'm going to hand the floor over to Amy, because I think she would do a better job.
Thank you, Mitch. Julie, Kat, any of you, if my memory fails me, please feel free to jump in. I think we started, as people were trickling in the room, talking about a little bit about labels and the idea that if you use the term disabled, is that, kind of distracting from the issue, or is it pigeonholing, or is it more about a reclamation and letting people identify themselves and say, hey, you've labeled me as this, and it seems like such a narrow thing, but actually in reclaiming that term, I want you to understand the whole spectrum of what it can mean and what it means for me as an individual. And then we went into a little bit the idea that, and Tony, forgive me if you want to jump in here, but, the idea of growth mindset and what we say we celebrate. For those of you that aren't familiar with growth mindset, we constantly tell students it's okay to fail forward. Failure is part of learning. And yet, how many of us would love to fail right now in this Zoom session? Like, none of us. It's not fun. It's hard. It's uncomfortable.
Well, some of us are more used to failing than others.
If you're a parent of teens, it's a daily occurrence. So Tony talked a little bit about not using the word fail and just saying, you're not there yet, which is also a part of growth mindset. And the idea that from a very early age, students are often tracked and pigeonholed and steered towards either a vocational track or an English literature, more ivory tower sort of degree, and the impact that has. And then we segued into Miriam, who is coming to us from Pakistan and in grade 8, and who feels that in Pakistan, corporations could partner with students much earlier to sort of shape them and help them develop the skill set that their company is going to need in the future. Because people are always saying, hey, these jobs didn't exist 50 years ago. But Miriam's like, they're kind of watering things down and making it general. Athletes are able to specialize. People are picking athletes, cricketers and footballers at the age of 4 and sending them these camps all summer. Why aren't we doing that with these corporations with, rising students? Yes, Guy, I'd love to hear from Miriam too. She had trouble unmuting. Miriam, would you copy and paste some of the things that you were saying in chat? And then we sort of rounded out by Kat basically sharing the idea that it's very essential that we hear from diverse voices, and the idea that what are we doing, you know, if we're in a classroom and those students are not participating, why is that? Is it because they're working 3 jobs? Is it because they're exhausted? They're struggling with health issues as a result of their identities? Okay, and I'll stop talking now. Julie, did you want to add anything? Kat, I don't know if I missed, I'm sure I missed big pieces.
I think you covered that really, really well. You know, the thing about the idea of the labeling and the ownership of it, you know, it's, you know, it's almost like we put it in a box, but actually sometimes having a label can actually be quite good, because you own it, you can then add to it. It's like your dictionary, it becomes your thesaurus for life, doesn't it? I might have this, but this word actually has lots of different meanings, and I'm going to choose this meaning today and maybe this meaning tomorrow, but it's still me and it's part of me, it's part of my identity.
Tony, I see your hands up. Yep, you're muted. Yeah. Here, there should be a box to allow you to unmute now. There you go.
Yeah, sorry. I want to add to all that. I think what's really important in all of this is it's not that it's not just that you can't succeed and fail. It's that I think in various of our systems, I'm sure we don't in all, but in various of our systems, we label some things effectively as failure before young people set out on them. So for instance, in the UK, we have long accorded a lower status to the vocational, to working with the hands, to working, you know, and as long as we have behavior strategies that involve throwing the naughty boys, usually the boys, but the naughty boys a car engine, we're never going to develop the top end engineers we need, because we've already said, if you're really serious about study, you go off and do English literature. And, you know, my father, who worked on without a qualification to his name, worked as a tool maker all his life, didn't want me to join the metalwork queue that went halfway around the call on options evening. He wanted me to be one of the 4 people in the English literature queue, because he knew that that was the route to a different status. That was the route into this room. And so I think we really need to think about how differentially we value different kinds of learning. And we really must have a conversation about what we mean by breadth, because every child should have access to high quality vocational and professional learning. I prefer to call it professional learning. Funny, if you go off to university and do law or medicine, they don't say that's vocational, that's academic. Of course it's vocational, you couldn't get more vocational, but we overlay social class over white collar, blue collar, and everything else. And certainly in the UK, and I think in some of our other settings, we've got to get away from those hierarchies. I'm not sure how, but we've got to. Having the conversation might be a start.
Thanks, Tony, and thanks, Amy and Julie. Conscious to bring in Group 3, Zoe. Any reflections in the last few minutes?
Yeah, I will just quickly sum up where we were. Moving on from Julie and Amy, one of the most important things is who is present, who is able to be in the room, who is able to affect change, and who that change affects. That is something that is systemic and we cannot ignore, and needs to be part of everything that we all do. And to understand when you are present, how you are yourself in that moment. How did you get there? Why are you in that space and not someone else? We also want practical steps forward, and we want answers to the question about failing in a capitalist labeled, to reference Tony, society. How does one fail when one has been labeled, or you just need money to live? The pressures of life are on people, on us all, but on some disproportionately. Also, Bloom's Rose came up, and that is something that I think would be definitely interesting for everyone to follow, to investigate. And I think the biggest thing for us was actually teaching all of us how to navigate life in a way that empowers oneself, but does not disempower somebody else. Learning to navigate in a way that is fully vital, a word that Jenny brought up, bringing vitality to the future in a way that is equitable, is a conversation that I believe, all need to have. And I think that was part of what our group was discussing, among many other things. The terror of being wrong, I know, is something that we're all very, well, I am controlled by, but I'd like to be less controlled by it moving forward. And that's part of my experience of this whole project, actually. I've said some most ridiculous things and have not been told off. So if you can ever have a space where you can be you, create that and move yourself and your colleagues forward.
I think that was a wonderful reflection to almost end on. We have 5 minutes left, and I at least want to make sure that a couple pieces of housekeeping are shared with you. First of them being this form that I just put into the chat. Everyone that registered will get this. And the reason why it's sort of, and possibly the thematic networks we support in terms of how we are thinking about this at the RS. I'm sort of speaking on behalf of Anthony at this point and those in London, but RSA is actually about to launch what we're calling the lifelong learning program. The way that programs now work at the RSA, if you've been a fellow for a number of years, programs are meant to cut across silos now, across the different local areas, teams, the public events, et cetera, things of that nature. So that form is really meant to help the people within the RSA who are leading that work to really figure out where can they sort of tap into already, the wonderful minds in this room. Those of you who happen to be fellows, those of you who aren't, I'm pretty sure this network will be open to non-fellows, just as Augmented Society Network is. But that's just the first step in terms of what we can do to sort of help catalyze this movement, to make sure that the work continues to get done, because as Jonathan, Mitch, and Zoe have made very clear, this isn't done. There is more work to be done, and I know that they will be looking to perhaps some of you in this room, to help take this forward.
If I might interrupt for just a second.
Go ahead.
To make sure that everybody is absolutely clear. I know me personally, I loved being a part of this. This is not my future. And it's certainly our baby, all of us that worked on it. And so nothing would bring more joy than for this to be carried forward in whichever form it is, right? The devastating thing for me is if it ends up on a shelf and collects dust. So if you are interested, please join in, be active in it, and know that the people that join in take this forward in whichever way it is organically meant to go forward. There's no sense of being beholden to those who were the originators of this project. We were just the starters.
Yeah,
it's everybody that is coming on.
Add on to that, one of the sandbox things Jonathan and I are going to be doing is putting this into AI, a discovery platform, to find out exactly what it was we were all talking about. So if anyone wants to be involved in that, that would be something we'd be looking at in the future, although I probably just surprised Jonathan by that. We knew we'd do something with it. And it's one of the most yeah, why not? One of the most interesting things to do is to actually see in a document where you thought you might have said something, what the intention or the intent was. So if anyone's interested in that, join us. But it's about our future. We would love you to take this forward in any way, shape or form. Sorry, Jonathan.
So no, just to mention that the whole document and everything we have talked is like a lot. But if you like just one theme and you like a lot and you want to join in that theme, well, you have the names of the team leads and the contributors, so you can do that and just take that part and join. It doesn't have to be all over everything we talk.
Yeah.
Just to mention that.
Absolutely.
Anything else, Jonathan, Mitch, Zoe?
No, just a massive thank you.
Thank you to everybody being here.
Thank
Thanks
you,
to
everyone.
everybody that was a participant so far. I can't wait to see what fruits this project bears into the future. It's been really exciting, really special.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Awesome. Thanks all. Have a wonderful
Thank you
rest of
to
your
Yeah, thanks.
afternoon, evening, and possibly morning if you're further west than I am.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Goodbye.